The Behemoth Brewing Company presents the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittington. Behemoth, give me something hoppy.
Kia ora whānau. Welcome back to another Fireside Chat. Will Fleming in the house with us this evening. Will, kia ora, and welcome to my fireplace.
Oh, dude, kia ora, Pat, and everybody. It's what a pleasure to be here with you during this time in history. It's I can't think of too many other people that I'd like to sit down next to a digital fire with, and you're one of them, brother.
Don't give away the secrets, right? I mean, no one knows that. Really, no one knows that. Although Martin Davidson asked me on the first night, "Is that a real fire?" And I went, "Yeah, see, it's really hot. See, it's hot as up there." Yeah. Oh, look, that's very kind of you. Very kind words that you mentioned as well. Thank you for joining us. And I guess people who don't know sort of our connection, it feels like you and I sort of started doing. I mean, in our latest iteration, kind of started doing the latest iteration of our podcasts again together about the same time, and we've sort of been talking about it all the way through and sort of catching up. Some stage you've been a guest on my podcast. I mean, I've never been on yours, but I understand that you only get the top echelon. That's not a problem.
No, we got to change that. We got to change that.
I get it.
No. It's not. We're not starting like this because we've got like an hour to go. But look, I'm going to use the word that everyone kind of either loves or hates, which is pivot. You know, the pivot. And I've pivoted again in this lockdown as opposed to last lockdown to, well, I'm going to see if I've got enough pre-recorded content of people in the studio. So coming here to my house, because I think we've lost this other little area in life now, which is like we're relying on this digital connection. And I think it's something like 80-20. As long as 80% is in real, then the digital stuff holds up. But this stuff is on steroids, and I don't know where it leads. So, yeah, I don't even know if I can scale that or what that means. But all I'm saying is you got to get yourself up these ways when you can, and I'll try and do the same. I mean, you've had many of awesome people come to your place, right? And that's probably why you're so strong and able to keep it together, because you've banked up that humanity, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. I mean, I'd like to just get clarity on what you're saying about yourself. So, are you sort of almost re-releasing IRL, like in real life, podcasts with people and putting them out there now? Like I mean, what it makes me think of is like, I listened to Mark Maron in the WTF podcast. When someone say passes away, he will re-release that podcast again. Are you sort of doing that for the in real life podcast, getting them up there again, giving that content out again to give people that interpersonal connection, so they can see interpersonal connection rather than digital connection?
Kind of, but I'm going to. So I had, because people come to my place, I went on a kind of good run before lockdown, and I had 3 or 4 episodes. So that's going to pad me out a little bit. And then I've got 3 or 4 episodes from last lockdown that I didn't release because I didn't know what the state of the world was going to be, and I still don't. But I've got all these kind of episodes banked pre-first lockdown. So a life without COVID. And I feel like a year in, it might be interesting to see if there's any difference in how people talked then and now.
So are you saying that they haven't actually been released at all? They've just been sitting in your hard drive somewhere ready to be released?
Just me not knowing what to do with them because it felt awkward. Like I'd end the conversation and hug someone. And then, of course, in today's world, that's a danger.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think on a worldwide scale, you're probably right. But really, up until Delta 10 days ago in New Zealand, I think we were living that life of hugging people and, that kind of stuff. Whereas today it feels very different. I mean, I saw a headline today somewhere saying that, level 2 might be what we basically have to get used to sort of permanently. And that's a bit of a freak out. To be honest, it's been so long I can't exactly remember what level 2 is, but it certainly is some restrictions, and I think it might be some restrictions around crowds and that kind of stuff. Nothing like what we're doing at the moment on level 4. And for people who are joining us and watching us because we're live streaming, especially if you're international, because they've been happening quite a bit in the last few nights. We are in New Zealand currently in a level 4 lockdown, and one of the reasons we're doing these evening fireside chats is as I was working as a late night talkback host when the Christchurch earthquakes happened. I realized quite quickly that late night time if anyone was going to feel extra stress or extra anxiety or sort of extra isolated and lonely, it was that late night time. So I thought, well, we can do this. We can get some people together and basically just have a chat, and people can join us, and it can be another voice going into their house and that sort of thing. But to hear anyway, and so that's what we're doing this for. And Will's graciously, said to come on board, and we'll have a chat. And if you want to join in, there are chat engines on all the platforms we're playing on. Just enter your comments in there, and we get them sent to us, and we can pass on your thoughts or whatever. Last night we had a bit of a conversation. The people in the chat were all talking to each other. It was kind of cool. Anyway, this idea about level 2, that could be our lives for the foreseeable future once we get out of 4. And 4 for us is currently basically go home, stay home, which is what we're in at the moment.
Well, also it makes you think, like, I've been learning a bit about stress lately, because a pet peeve of mine is when someone just says something like mindfulness and everyone's expected to know what that means.
Right.
Like, we're all got a different baseline depending on how we are. And that's just the kind of brutalness of life, that, you might just be someone who can tolerate things because of A and B. But the challenge that we have is we have these like scale conversations, like when everyone joins to watch the news, it's a conversation at scale, and there's like limited nuance because it has to work for everybody. And so I think that the issue we get into is like, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for you? I'm not so sure what to do with all of this information. And in the end, I think it just registers as stress for a lot of us. So I think I came up with a little bit of a pivot, using it the second time. Let's make that a drinking game. Every time Will says pivot, that I would try and understand stress. And the problem with these levels, as far as I can see, is they all indicate a certain level of stress. And I think we've got to be really mindful that I'm hoping when we talk about life at a level 1, or whatever that means, is that it means you can go and give someone a hug, or invite them over without having to pre-think of too many things, or you're going to be triggering this response. And I don't know, I'd be keen to get your thoughts. Like, are you doing these fireside chats because there's a level of kind of triggering that's happening? You're easily triggered during this time because you're already kind of up-regulated?
I think for me, it really is genuinely about other people. Because to be honest, I work from home. I'm in my office. This is what I do 90% of the time. When I say this is what I do, I don't mean literally live stream broadcasting, but in this office with this equipment, is I'm working with clients and I'm making them radio adverts, or I'm making a podcast and putting it out, or I'm working on a like a proposal for another thing I can do in the studio or whatever. So my life hasn't changed that much. And to be honest, I didn't. Well, we've got time. I guess I can explain the whole story. I didn't feel too much stress per se, or probably what's more truthful is I didn't acknowledge too much stress in that first lockdown. And I had an incident at the end of last year. I started sort of writing about it. And if people go onto my Instagram, they can have a look in the videos and see some stuff that I did about it, where I went to my daughter's, she was in whatever standard 4 is, year 6, and they did like a play at the end of the year, and the play was about the year. And of course, a part of that was to do with COVID and the lockdown. And as a part of their play, they had a character playing Jacinda, and they played that sound, and they played that audio that played on that lockdown. At 11:59 tonight, New Zealand will be going to a nationwide level 4. It was, they played the actual sound, and my body went, "Ugh." And it was at that moment that I kind of realized, when you're talking about stress, that there was stuff I was still holding on to from that. There was something quite deep, and I don't want to belittle other people who have been through super serious attacks and stuff, and they have real PTSD. I don't want to quite call it that, but it was something. It was something that was visceral and physical for me. And when I heard the sound, sitting in the auditorium watching my 11-year-olds or 10-year-olds play, I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting because this has been a pretty fucking awful year. And I don't think I've acknowledged it. So whilst I felt like I kind of, I maybe even able to say kind of enjoyed the lockdown last time around, there was other stuff going on a deeper level that obviously I hadn't dealt with, that I needed to deal with. Now, I'm again I'm busy and I'm working, and I've got my partner staying, and I've got a boarder who lives here as well, and she's turning 19 tomorrow, and we're throwing her a big birthday party because she can't be with her family, so we're kind of trying to celebrate that for her. And and I don't want to say that I'm enjoying it. I don't want to be flippant, because this is hard for some people, but I'm not feeling particularly stressed about it. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, dude, remember the year 6 play? Remember how you felt. Now, what are you holding on to? What do you have going on that maybe you're not acknowledging? So I guess, long story, but going back to this, about why I'm doing this, it comes back to seeing stress in other people when the Christchurch earthquakes happened. And like, I was working on ZB as a host from midnight to 6 a.m. I'd get phone calls from people at 3 a.m. You could hear them like weeks later, still shaking, their voices still trembling, still having kids who couldn't sleep. And I went, dude, I'm just some buff-headed nobody from, Otipoti and Dunedin who can't do very much, but I love to talk. And I know that one of the things that these people were listening to us on Talkback about is they just needed a voice. And look, they've still got that. News Talk ZB is still there. Whatever that other one's called, Magic Talk, is that what it is? It's still there. I'm not saying anyone's not doing it well, but like, why not have more voices? Why not have more places that people can come and chill? And so they've just finished watching their latest show on Netflix, and they're going to bed, and they're feeling a bit like there's something in the back of their head that's not quite feeling right. And there can be another voice in the house. It's great for podcasts. That's what podcasts are about. But the reason we're live streaming is we are here right now. It is, as we speak, 9:42 on Thursday night. You are in, Tauranga. You are in Christchurch. You are in Nelson. Maybe you're overseas and it's a different time, but we're here right now with you, just hanging out, and come hang out with us. So extremely long answer. The reason I'm doing this is because of my experience as being a talkback host with the earthquakes, but I also acknowledge that the stress and the stuff that you talked about and the triggering could still be a part of me, even though it's not feeling particularly that way right now. But I'm wanting to be open and aware of that. So I'm open to that.
Well, I know one of the things also that I've learned about, I guess I won't get too much into the weeds because I don't want to be making claims, but at some point in life, we have to make claims, right? So the first thing I'd say is, you mentioned that you got to be careful not to, maybe I'll just paraphrase, complain when other people are out there going through some major stuff, right? The challenge with that, bro, is that stress is stress. And I know from psychology, stress is something like a real threat or an imagined one. And the problem is with stress is that it triggers adrenaline, okay? And it's all very logical. What happens is your adrenaline gets triggered, and then that supports you getting into a fight or flight zone, and people can understand that, right? The thing that no one talks about, though, is when you're in a fight or flight zone, your other regulator, so the opposite to fight or flight. Pat, do you know the name to the opposite end of fight or flight?
Oh, well, I've always thought about fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
They're
and
the
so
three
what's the
things.
opposite to that?
Well, what's the opposite of fight or flight or freeze? I don't know.
That's our challenge of why we have this skyrocketing mental health, because the opposite side is as important. That's right. Yeah, there's just a comment coming in here. The parasympathetic nervous system, or rest and digest. And the answer's in the actual word, rest and digest. So your digestion system turns off when you're in fight or flight, so you can't process food properly. Your reproductive system lowers. And like, these are pretty major things. And so I think it's also advocating for people that it does matter why you have these triggers, but it doesn't matter because it turns it on regardless if it's real or not. So that's why when people do Wim Hof breathing or hop in the ice bath, they're activating stress, but then they're controlling it when they hop out. And I guess the other thing about the PTSD stuff is it's hard to control something like that, right? So, but yeah, man, and I just think, like, when we talked about levels, like, what is like a level 0 or normal life or life where you can sleep without waking up in a sweat? That's what I'm aiming for, but I don't even know what that means anymore. I've actually
Yeah,
been reading a lot because I don't know what we're currently going through.
yeah. No,
Mm.
it's really interesting, and yeah, I'm reminded again, and I'm not relating it directly to the Christchurch earthquake, but I know a counsellor based out of West Auckland who was working with ACC, and she was going to Christchurch after the quake. And you talk about the digestive system. It's a bit of a weird way to think about it, but Christchurch was running out of toilet paper after the quakes, and one of the reasons is because with the stress became upset tummies, and upset tummies required more use of. And I've noticed for me in the last few days, I've been a little bit on the edge with I found a bit nauseous for that time period.
Mm.
And I've actually, because of my conversation with her about what she did as a counselor for people in Christchurch, I've kind of gone, even though I'm not necessarily not enjoying my time right now, I can feel underlying things. That was one of my symptoms that I kind of went, oh. And
Mm.
actually, someone just asked me today, "How's your tummy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's actually feeling a bit better." So I might have travelled through it a little bit, because I think
Mm.
as well, we as a country, and I don't know if you're feeling this, but this lockdown feels very different to last year, and I think it
Yeah.
feels very different for a couple of reasons. I think be it subconscious or not, we have a vaccine, and many people have it. So even if people who don't have it, they're like, well, I'll stay safe for the next few months and then I'll get it. But also we know so much more. I mean, I was out on the streets of Dunedin today. I went to the supermarket to load up for a birthday party, and I just noticed the streets felt like Sunday driving. They
Yep.
didn't feel like week one lockdown last year when it felt like Christmas morning with no
Mm.
one. You know what I'm saying? So I think the country might be being a bit more relaxed with us as well. I'm certainly feeling more relaxed, but I'm still trying to be honest with myself and with you and with other people, that I think there's still, all of us have probably still got underlying things, even if we are finding this one
Yes.
easier than the last one.
Yeah. Well, we also have more time with ourselves, which is what we aim for when we suppress, right? So again, we won't go into too much of bog ourselves in the detail. We're just two chaps chatting. But, you can imagine a plethora of us going to nightclubs, to booze, to ooze, whatever's happening in the mind to calm. But of course that's just one way, and I think that's not a very good way. Actually, it's probably an effective way. I think I read some studies around booze does turn off that overactive mind, but it also it turns off that overactive mind, but then it comes back to haunt us the next day, and actually, I guess what I'm saying by that is, where I've been really interested recently is, what is this area of homeostasis, or the center point, balance, if you like, something that it's incredibly hard to achieve, even though most people say they've probably got it, but they'd be probably what would you call it, bending the truth. And how can we get better at pushing in and out of those two zones, that fight or flight, or rest and digest? And yeah, man, I find the whole lot fascinating, because I think, again, we're only really still in this zone of a little bit panic, a little bit upregulated, and so that's probably why, when you pitched me the idea to come on the podcast, I've also been exploring and researching and studying this world of kind of calm breathing, and what that is, and how to access, like, a place where you'll lead your mind to a place where it won't be panicking. Fantastic before you go to bed, for example. And this will freak you out or not, but for the last year, I've been actually taping my mouth closed. I know this is
Wow.
going to sound pretty weird, but, like, taping it so that I'm forced to breathe through my nose at night. And this is doing a couple things. First of all, it's supporting less snoring, right? Less sleep apnea and choking. And also, it's the nose, and I segued us pretty hard to talking about the nose, but it's this beautiful inbuilt filter, right? That switches nostrils every 90 minutes depending on what your brain needs for ventilation and clearing, and so like it is all related, but I feel like no one's really talking about that stuff. So I'm happy that the people joining us tonight get to hear a bit about it.
Yeah, and not just the ones joining this tonight, because obviously this then becomes an on-demand product. So for people who watch it, and I'm ripping the audio as well, pardon me, and putting it up as audio content. So not just people who are with us right now. Speaking of, we have someone, and we got to always mention the fellow Dunedinites. Is it Threads in Time? Threads in Time, just his fellow Dunedinite. That, yeah, there's a couple of things about you, Will, that I really appreciate. One is your voice. You have a very calming voice. So I thought, if nothing else, whilst we talk, I'll shut up some more and just let you talk. And as you talk, people might just calmly drift off. It's a lovely voice. You have a lovely tone. But I've been, following, as we've chatted a few times. We never really chatted about breathing, but I've been following you on Instagram and watching your ice baths and watching your breathing. And I'm quite sure that you've heard the stuff and the people that have been through some of the American podcasts and their conversations around breathing and that as well. And I thought you're I'm going to use the word practitioner. I don't know where you are in your actual expertise and how you'll claim yourself, but certainly more so than the average bloke with someone with some of these techniques in calming. And dude, I love being the dumbest guy in the room. Educate me, and you educating me might help some other people who are out there as well if they're feeling a bit sort of stressed or overwhelmed.
Well, I mean, it's a interesting chat, bro, because it's not really a re-education. It's more of a, what's the word for you gotta, we know it. It's within us. We just forgot. And so I'm kind of one of those people, and maybe it's the podcaster in me. Like, it's not enough that I can set up microphones and studios. I need to know how to work it all, right?
You're right.
Like, for example, when you cut a shot tonight on your cameras, you're in charge of the whole lot, and that's a certain type of, I think, a personality. And it's like someone who's curious and wants to know how to make it all work and facilitate these conversations and have the fire in the background. And I think that's why we really get on. And I'm someone like that about many things, which is why I referenced, like, it's really tough for me if someone says, just do this and it does that. Well, you've got to explain why. And that's the storyteller. You've got to help me understand why it's important for this. And so I went on this big deep dive, and maybe to answer your question, I don't know where I am on the expertise level. I'm definitely on a voyage. I probably know more than most just because I went back to study this a little bit. But what do you mean when you study breathing? It's not in. It's not in. It's only highlighted in little areas. It's highlighted, like in the Bible. It's highlighted as a practice tool for therapists, but it's not. There is no cause and effect that people would say, do this and it does that. But it is the only cause and effect. You only hyperventilate, which takes you into a state of panic, through your breathing.
You're right.
It's the most ultimate cause and effect. So the opposite is also true, So if you breathe quickly, you will do the following. You will hyperventilate. And so my question was, what does that do? Well, it raises your blood pressure. It raises your heartbeat. You're preparing for battle, basically. It will dilate. No, what is it? Dilate. What's the one where it constrict your eyeball, your iris, so you have a smaller field of view, and you basically are ready for danger. And so, what kind of freaked me out is when I read that a lot of humans today, a lot of people today, breathe at a rate of mild hyperventilation. That answered a lot of questions for me, Pat.
Like all the time, you mean?
Well, yeah, I think the optimal breathing rate is something like where humans used to breathe, let's say 500 years ago, would be around 4 to 10 breaths a minute. We're breathing
Really?
around 15 to 20 breaths a minute. So that's why when I do breathing with people, it's based on this slower rhythm of about 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. One, because there's really strong studies on that. And two, because I like the interweaving that it has with like religion. And look, I'm someone who doesn't know where they sit on everything, But I like the idea that if you were going to breathe in a way that would connect you with God, the answer is that it would be breathing in this slow way that made you feel calm, that made you feel like hope exists, right? And so that's that kind of rhythm. So, like, basically, in short, if you breathe at a rate that's about 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, you will activate, like someone said in here, your parasympathetic, your calm state of the mind and body. And I think it's beautifully simple, but you can't tell people to be calm and then watch them breathing quickly the whole time. It's like we've really lost half of a story, which is if you breathe slow, you can access calm. So, yeah.
Anytime you talk about this, surely, and because I know, because I'm doing it, you must feel the people around you start going, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. It must just happen, and part of me thinks, I mean, you'll know this. I can't ever imagine that being a trained thing. I can only imagine that being something I always need to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So,
Like I can't imagine it being something that my body just naturally does. I can only imagine that it would be something that I'd have to be concentrating to get the actual timing, quote unquote, right.
Look, you raise a big, interesting point here. So I've thought about this too a lot, right? Because I think when people tell you what's healthy and what's good for you, there's a lot of variety out there. Some of us are tall, some of us are short, some of us are thin, some of us are wide. We obviously have a lot of variety in life and in ourselves. So I think how I've consolidated it is that there's 2 systems that we have that we can manually drive and outsource automatically. And it's blinking. We can take over control of that, and breathing. So there's an answer for me in there. And of course, I'm not making huge claims because I can't cite everything, but here's how I'd outline it. If you're someone who's, let's say, like a great ancestor of ours 500 years plus ago, you're more likely have control over your body because you're moving more, maybe, just on average. You probably, although you wouldn't have access to all of the awesome foods, well, you'd have to work for your food, something like that. So your temple, your vessel, would be your machine, and you could probably outsource a lot more to it. I think our bodies today require us to manually go to the gym to find, to feed it the right way, and unfortunately, I think breathing is now one of those things where we can't just assume automatic outsourcing. And I'll give you a reason for that. We used to chew a lot more, like up to 4 hours a day, our ancestors. So what did that do? Well, it gave us these big square jaws, like the Brad Pitt jaw.
Yeah.
It blew my mind when I thought that the reason people like square jaws is because it actually signals health. So how did it signal health? Well, the jaw was strong enough to stay closed at night. And most of our jaws can't. So what happens? Our jaws fall open. And we know this because many of us snore, Many of us have sleep apnea, which is kind of the airways getting blocked. And so that's why I was referencing, like, I've taken manual overdrive. I will never have a big square jaw because I just didn't chew the right food, maybe. But I can hack it. I can take manual overdrive and keep that mouth shut as nature intended. And then I can reap some of the benefits, which is the nose will help you breathe slower and deeper, So look, I don't know if that's interesting or not, but I like trying to work out that at scale, we're all trying to breathe better, but individually we've got to find solutions and tips and tricks that work for us.
Look, I think the thing that's really interesting is actually your story as well. I mean, I've watched you I've been doing this for this iteration for, I think we started in August actually, so it's 3 years. I don't know if you're about the same with Please Blow My Mind, but it feels like it's a similar sort of time frame. and watching you on your own personal journey from afar and through your Instagram and that kind of stuff, and watching you and tell me if I'm wrong, but this is what it looks like, looking to attain more physical health and well-being to maybe giving you a more emotional, spiritual, mental well-being as well, and maybe insights. And it's something that's an inspiration, and it's something that I don't know if I'm a broken human being when it comes to physicality. I don't have cartilage behind my kneecaps anymore. I've got arthritis in my lower spine. I'm the kind of person that should be doing that, and I struggle to. I've got arthritis in my spine. I struggle to have a backbone in more than one way. I struggle. I look at you and I think, man, if I could have half of what it appears that you've got in drive to want to better yourself physically, to help yourself holistically, I would be a better person for it. And I'm saying that out loud. I know that people are going to go, well, just do it. Like, yeah, that's easy to say sometimes. And for some people, it's harder to do for whatever reasons. And I'm not looking for a pity party or anything, but it's one of the things that I really appreciate about you is looking at you and thinking, maybe when I grow up, I can be like Will one day, maybe.
Pat, I got to
Maybe.
stop you, man. I got to stop you there, because that's the drama we get ourselves into in life. That is a inaccurate outline. I am like you too. I'm trying to find a way that I can make myself healthier and better. I don't feel that way, and I've actually never felt that way. So I'm the youngest of 3 brothers and sisters from a second marriage. I'm like the baby. I'm like the ultimate spoiled brat, right? And although that gave me a prism to look through the world through love, it's worth jack shit in today's world. Sometimes it's awesome for my marriage, and it's awesome for my kids, and it's awesome to be a nice podcast host, but it's not useful because I can't look at pain and understand it, because I was sheltered from that. And I'm not
Right.
saying I want pain, but pain will find you, you know? And so, it might be your conscience, or it might be unlucky moments, or a plethora of things. And I don't know what to do with that, which is why I podcast. My hypothesis would be that, can you ask people who have come back from the abyss or pain itself, can they transfer knowledge to you? And can that be enough for you not to have to walk through that fire on your own? I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that clues come up, like I started hearing too many people talk about breathing in my podcast. I started hearing, and this was before these big words like breath work were repopularized. I also started hearing a lot of people talk in a way which was very spiritual, yet they would call themselves atheists. And I couldn't quite work out. I guess the big thing that revealed itself is that we're all more similar, which makes total sense. And that this need we have, or this fascination we have with creating teams, is like a bit of a not reality, but it's hard to know what reality is when that's what you see. The algorithm feeds us these things. And I don't go down the rabbit hole too deep with that, but it definitely feels like that, right? Feels like there's this other kind of incentive here to find the people who back up your thoughts. And so I don't think I like that. I'm someone who, in the last month, I've had a Presbyterian priest, a Catholic dude, someone who was a former cop who basically had PTSD. Now he's an artist, and I'm trying to leech off them, really, and share with me. And so my big one at the moment is the consolidation of having something bigger to believe in,
Mm.
and I still don't know that, but I definitely am worried that, what's the saying, that throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that if you believe in yourself as the God, the world might be too heavy, but I could be wrong there. I mean, I'm probably wrong there, but you know what I mean? picking
I'm
the
hearing
right
you.
thing to believe in is our journey. And I'm just at that point, 40 years old, trying to work out how to make money and be happy and do all the things, and also the consolidation that life is damn hard for people, and trying to find ways to articulate that. And if I can funnel that through my content, awesome. If I can have friends like you who we can throw these ideas around, awesome.
I think it's really interesting. When you hear someone say something else and you're like, "That's a really interesting idea." Remind me to come back about the 3 days of lockdown, and I'll give you an example. But I'll I as you're speaking, I'm thinking it resonates with me quite a lot because I didn't have a lot of pain in my upbringing. I had, a family, immediate family, a mum, a dad, siblings. The thing that I found that there wasn't even any divorce around me. It's like all my mum and dad's best friends and all of my uncles and aunts who lived where we lived, none of that existed. So all of the, you know what I mean by authority figures, all the parental figures in my life were all two families, my mum and a dad that stayed together their whole lives. Still, they're all together now, other than the ones who have passed. And families all fairly successful financially. Not necessarily rich or wealthy, but certainly doing fine. So that's what I grew up in. So then when my marriage got to that point, it's like I was like, holy crap, I don't even think I know how to deal with this because it's never been a part of my life. And it's like, this is not supposed to be a part of my life because like the shame that comes with that, and the self-loathing that comes with that, and the suicidal ideations that comes with that, and this utter failure. And for people who know my story, and I'm not going to get into it now, people have been known me for long enough. If you don't, it's on my blog. Actually, my marriage breakup, it literally was a no-fault breakup. No one did anything, and that to cause a marriage. But even with a no fault breakup, it was just something I didn't have the capacity to be able to deal with. And part of that, why it resonates right now, is what you've just said about brought up in a pretty privileged, safe environment where there wasn't a lot of pain. So I get it. And so you saying that has caused me to go, yeah, that's actually a really interesting perspective from my own life I've never thought of. And it's a tangent, but it is. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
no,
that was really interesting.
We have to really think about it that way, because think about why it's like that. It's most likely the case that someone a couple generations back suffered hard. And I know for my mum, she came from the Cook Islands, 6 years old, thrown into school, in the 50s or whatever it was, didn't know how to speak English, didn't know her name. Like, we would arrest parents for putting their kids through that. But she survived and built resilience, and then used that as she went on in her life. And, the first marriage was horrific, and the husband, beat her to a pulp and just scraped through, right? It's like every movie that we watch that the hero has to go to the edge of, the space continuum to come back and find something. And of course, the gift they gave us was to keep us away from every bit of that. But the challenge we have now is life's still that hard. And at times I think we're not prepared for it. And so when it hits us, it really hits us. And there is no answer here, Pat. I'm not saying anything. I mean, one example is she fed me like a king because she was hungry as a kid. But guess what I have now? High blood pressure as a 40-year-old, trying to constantly lose weight, having yo-yo diets where I've just come off a 7-day potato diet, trying to curb my addiction to sugar. But, this is a life, they kept us away from pain, but they didn't really, because now we have arthritis and stuff in our spines. And you know what I mean, bro?
It's interesting to think what I hear, and I think about this with my parents sometimes, and maybe my mum more in particular, because she was sort of, the caregiver in the house. Not that dad wasn't, but it was a traditional, 50s couple that dad was out working and mum was at home caring for the kids. And what resonates with me with what you're saying is, she gave me what she could. They gave me what they could.
Yeah.
And I don't say this in a negative towards my folks, far from it, but they can only give you what they can, and it's not always what you need. I think about that with my kids sometimes. Like, I can only give them what I can, and I'm sure when they're 20 and 30 and 40 and reflecting on their lives, they'll be going, "Oh, but Dad never gave me this, which is what I needed." And that's both terrifying and freeing at the same time, because we all want to give our kids what they need, but maybe that comes with a self-awareness and authenticity. We try, but like you're saying, it's like maybe the food stuff around with my upbringing and that as well is like we had treats and we had this and we had that, but that did cause pain later in life. So I didn't see the pain as a child, but later in life there was some pain that came with some of those habits and some of those styles of living that maybe my mum thought was, as you say, feeding you like a king, which was treating you, giving you good things and giving you, special things, but might not have been ultimately what was best in the long run. But not that they knew that.
No, yeah, and like, I'm just not being rude. I'm just loading up something on my phone because I took a screenshot of something that I'm still processing, and it was just the dad out there, and I screenshotted it. So I don't know if you can see that, but he said, "Can you give your kids these things?"
Let me go full screen. Let me go full screen on you, and then it'll be easier for everybody to say. There we go, full screen. Go for it.
So, can you give your kids these things, or can you give yourself these things? Can you be present, patient, resilient, kind, and loving? And I had to really sit back because, man, I can't do all of those things. I'm not tough enough, or I'm not in a position where I can give all those things to work or podcast guests. So tonight you'll get all of those things.
Thanks.
But the challenges, the ones who need it the most, I think that's the true sign of strength, right? It's not a gender thing. It's like a people thing. Can you, and it's probably where it comes back to the breathing. Can you breathe your way to calm? So to get yourself out of that fight or flight, to have a more peripheral vision, to have a better blood flow, right? When you widen your blood vessels with slow breathing, you get better blood flow to the brain. And it's a really important thing. Your heart slows down. It tells the mind there's not a tiger chasing you. And the problem is, like, those kids are little tigers sometimes. And, I would like to be zen and be tough enough and disciplined enough, which is why you see me farting around with different exercise techniques. Because, like, can I master myself enough that I can handle them, even if they're poking at you? And at the moment, the answer is I can't. And I think a lot of us are in that boat because, what does that mean? What does it mean to be in control and balanced and not like a person where that's my way or the highway? And I think that's what they mean by all of the mindfulness conversation, but I just don't think it goes deep enough for most people to understand why you would ever need to be mindful.
Yeah. It's interesting having the thought process or the explanation as to what mindfulness is, because you're right. And I think we as human beings so often hear something, read something, see a headline and go, yeah, I like that. But the actual truth and the authentic nature of understanding that is to go deeper as to what that headline means or what that word means and how it then applies to your life. Because I think about mindfulness and I think about, there's those cool apps on my phone and I can put the music on and it can talk to me and cool, cheer, I'll go to sleep with one of those, and it's a relax. I guess I think about mindfulness and the word that comes to mind is relax, but actually mindfulness is so much more than that.
And it's just like we're these multifaceted creatures that we've got to do it for ourselves and others. It's like even the capacity to think past, present, future is pretty awesome, but it's a heck of a burden as well. And I think that's something a little bit freeing at times when lockdown isn't hunting for you, which is like you're just in the now. I had that with the last one until it got a bit weird. At the beginning, I was like, I only have to worry about right now because before there was vaccines and all that, there was no tomorrow. It was like, go to the supermarket, get what you need and come home and see if you can do that safely. And this one feels a little bit like a bad sequel,
This is grown-ups too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Superman 4, like the 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 well, I don't know, it's a bad sequel, but the bad guy got badder, hey, and the internet's rampant now, and everyone's kind of supercharged with. Like, I was thinking about it the other day. We haven't really got through psychologically what has already been a pretty hefty year or two,
Hmm.
but we're back in this. I think there's a lot of people who had to really reconsolidate what life means to them professionally, spiritually, emotionally, and and who's to say you can do all that in a year? Because we're back into this, and really it's quite strange because we're just in these mini tribes again, and we've got to kind of work through that, but it unlocks everything, and it's like, what does tomorrow mean is the thing that haunts us.
Yeah, the thing I came out of the last one with, when I had this episode at the end of the year at my daughter's recital thing, was the phrase, about being kind to yourself, was
Mm,
something I tried to impart into myself at the end of last year. And I remember thinking, because last year was basically, it wasn't quite a nothing year, but certainly we lost so much time of it. And I'm just looking at an article right now over on the ODT, and David Skeggs is saying lockdown likely for weeks, COVID war for years. So it's
mm,
like, geez, that's pretty depressing. But I remember thinking, and still stand by this, that if you got anything achieved last year, that you should celebrate that massively. Like, getting one thing achieved in 2020 would be like getting 20 things achieved any other quote unquote normal year. And
mm,
this idea of what we've put on ourselves, and what we think of ourselves, and how we judge ourselves, like what we consider to be important, and how we rate ourselves.
mm,
I think typically, human beings are harsh on themselves anyway. We don't like to get too much praise. Most people don't. People who do, we don't like to be up the front too much. We don't like to be too seen. um but actually, if anyone did anything last year, achieved anything, move forward in any kind of reason, any kind of way, there should be a massive celebration. And I think that should roll over to this year as well, because
mm,
whilst for the first, me and bar a couple of hiccups for some localized areas, for the first 8 months, it was pretty much a normal time in New Zealand. It still wasn't. And every now and again, I think all of us woke up to the fact that there was something, this thing was still out there. It's like we were living, like I used to watch, oh gosh, what's it called? It's a zombie program. It's on TV at the moment. It's
Walking
Walking
Dead.
Dead. Walking Dead. It was like we had this, and I stopped watching after about 7 or 8 seasons, because all the storylines were basically the same every week. But I really, really liked it, what I watched. And you get these areas that are like a really safe city with big high walls, and the zombies were outside. And that's kind of what it feels like now to me with COVID in New Zealand. It's like that thing was at our border the whole time, and it was at the walls the whole time. And you know what? It's got through. So even though it feels like the first 8 months of this year were kind of chill, and most people are saying things like we're living like there was no COVID, it's not true, because the fucking zombies were at that wall the whole time, and we knew it. So that does, again, puts this thing about stress, and what it does to you, and what it puts in the back of your mind constantly. So it was a constant thing. I think about people who are going through health issues, and let's say they're going through some kind of treatment, and even if the treatment ends up being very good for them and they come through it, it's still on their mind constantly. It's always there. And I reckon that's what this year has. Last year it was like the physical impartation of what COVID was, and it still is, but was for that year. This year is like the mental impartation, that's not a word. The mental side of it still always being on our mind. So it was like always there as a threat for us physically last year, and it feels like this year it's always been there for us mentally, which is as exhausting, if not more exhausting sometimes.
mm. Yeah, man, and that's what we're talking about. Like, if we took baseline measurements of things that affect your mental health, your heartbeat on average, your blood pressure, I'd say we're all constantly in this state particularly now, with the leading up to the 1 o'clock reports, our blood pressure will be rising, anticipation of what to expect, and then maybe because it's a one-way street where you watch this content, and you don't really get a resolution, or you have to wait around till 6 o'clock to see what it means for you. It's not clear how to process that, and I think the thing that I find challenging too is it's quite hard to know. Well, it's a kind of conscience thing. You sit there, and because you can't see your colleagues if you work somewhere, you don't know if people talk about you or not. So you don't know
Right.
what's enough and what's not enough. Like there's the things it's okay not to be okay, and you don't have to be all productive. But really, I really do think everyone still expects that. You know, um, I think we kind of expect it. Like if you go to the supermarket, you expect an excellent level of service,
Mm.
even though we do know that it's at a point where people don't have to kind of perform. Well, that's the messaging, right? I know because I do some teaching, and part of the messaging was let's not overwhelm the students. And I don't really know what that means, but I kind of get the sentiment. Let's not bombard people with emails. But I looked at it and it's like, I'm sure they still are. I'm sure there's still a bombardment. Like my kids got emails, and the teacher sent one to me saying, haven't heard from your kid. So I'm touching base. I still get the ones from work saying, we'd like you to complete the survey.
Mm.
So we do expect a high level of service and delivery. But I think the sentiment is right. Can we actually deliver that? Maybe, but at a cost. And I think one of the things that you sparked up before, and maybe I'll ask it a couple different ways. So, have you interviewed Professor Julia Ruckledge from Canterbury University? So,
I have
she's an
not.
expert in micronutrients, right? Like, just quickly, you've got like your fats, proteins, carbs. Everyone knows those. Those are the macronutrients, right? But the micronutrients are the vitamins and all of the building blocks, right? They're the one. They feed the brains, our brain. She did research during the Christchurch earthquake, where people who had a good micronutrient base, they ate
Mhm.
enough of the right things, were more resilient to life when it came for you. Right. And I guess one of the things you sit back and you think there's so many different things we can be doing, whether it's breathing exercises or making sure that our micronutrients, but we've outsourced the whole lot, right? Lots of people can't go to the gyms anymore. That means exercise is stopped. We still go to the supermarket. We trust that everyone will have our best interest in mind when it comes to food. But the micronutrients, the building blocks of life that help you um, get out of a panic state, they're
Mm.
hardly even regulated, So it's like, I think for me, we can only ask ourselves to do so much in the modern world. And I think the best thing is like exactly what we're doing now. Like, trust that it's enough to hang out with other people. And right now it's digitally. And hopefully in your bubble, it's physically. But lean on that. That's what I've been trying to lean on. Like, listen to that. Um, practice those things I was talking about. Can you be resilient, patient? And, if you can't, it's like they're all clues, eh? They're all clues, as is anxiety, clues that something's not right. But of course, that's life's journey, which is like, well, how do you find the answer to that stuff? And I'm not sure, but I think it's a combination of things, and I'll let you know if I find it.
Well, I'm sure if you do find it, we can hear it on your podcast. That'll be pretty
True that.
obvious as well.
True that.
I was going to say, you're in like your home studio now, and you were showing us, just lean to the side so we can see. So you got your sort of little sitting area behind you where people do their conversations back there. You had a van at one stage, eh? You're going around places in the van. Have you still got the van studio?
I've still got the van, but I've pinched a few things out of the van to make the hub work. And I think the I'd like to redo the van, but I'd like it to be a motorhome. I like the idea of plug and play. There was too many little fiddly things. First and secondly, I'm like 6'5", so I just fit in the van.
Right.
And it's kind of mildly interesting for the guest, but not really. They're like, why are you squeezing into this little space? And so kind of like what I like about bringing in a guest here is it's still a tiny bit awkward inviting someone to your house. We don't really do
Mhm.
that, particularly with people we don't know. But I like the idea there's space and we can sit down and have a good chat. And I actually did a post the other day that I don't even share the full video, and I haven't for a while. So I don't even know why I do it, but I like the idea that I'll make the space look nice for someone in real life, and
Mhm.
I'll try and transfer all of that in-person connection to the digital space. That's something I'm exploring at the moment, is like, I know this, for example, is working really well, but I just feel like I need a bit more. I need that in-person connection to really, look, this is going to sound weird, but transfer chemically, right? To be there with me, and I have a real deep instinct that that's even more important now that we're in these kind of stages of can't see other people.
Yeah, but also just from a, I mean, I'm not saying you put on a performance, but from a performance point of view, from actually doing something, having someone across the room from you, it's so much easier. I'm finding with me that doing this digitally is great on one hand because I get access to people all over the world. You know, I've got requests in with people on every continent of the world at the moment, which is sort of what I've always, well, I haven't always done it actually, because I used to just only do face to face. That was sort of one of the things we did. I never wanted to go near, it was then Skype. Of course, now everything's Zoom. But once lockdown happened, we started this. So the benefit was we can talk to anyone in the world, and we have every country in the world. But the downside is, even if the conversation's very good and very confident and very kind of bouncy, I'm still finding that there might be a point where if it was in person with someone, I'd go, oh, but what about, and because of the opening and closing the gates of the technology of these things, you don't want to start talking and cut their last sentence off. And so, yeah, there is that hindrance there as well. But I think, I don't know if it's just me or whether the technology is just caught up a little bit. I think I've got it to a point now where I don't want to say I almost enjoyed more doing it digitally than in person, but I say to people now who are like coming through Dunedin, because you know the idea was someone would be coming through Dunedin, so I'll have you in studio when you come through. I now, like, if you'd like to talk before you get to Dunedin, we can just do it digitally. You know, it's not a problem. Either way you want to do it, and I kind of leave it up to them. If it's possible to either do in person or digitally, I ask them what they want, but I give them the option. So I think I've got it to a point where I'm quite comfortable. I have pages and pages and pages of, they're all over here, all these things. There's Rebecca Campbell's page there, and Tom Sainsbury's page, and you know, and just pages of people that when they're talking, I'll jot something down because I don't want to cut them off. So rather than cutting them off, I just jot down what the question was on Justin O'Sullivan's page. So I just jot down the question and I let them finish their point, and then I come in, which many might say that's how an interview should kind of go. Maybe you shouldn't be jumping in on their feet. You should wait for them to finish. So maybe on some level it's made them better content anyway. I don't know.
Mm. Hey, I've got two questions to follow up on guests you've had. Who's someone that like you're really pumped to have on the podcast, and who's a guest that made you a bit nervous to talk to, like where you could catch yourself feeling a bit anxious?
I don't think I've ever really felt nervous.
Wow.
Having Jimmy Neesham in my house in the studio was kind of cool. That's kind of good fun. I don't think I was really. This is the thing about not feeling pain on the upbringing. I was quite lucky, perhaps, on some levels in my upbringing, because my dad was the president of the Auckland Rugby Referees Association, which means we went to all the Auckland after-match functions, and any All Black after-match function that was held at Eden Park, we went to them. So as a kid, as a little fella, you know, not that necessarily, you know, I knew them or they knew me, but I was in the room with, you know, Zinzan Brooke and the Brooke brothers and, you know, John Kerwin and these sort of guys. And my dad also ran a business. He had Martin Sneddon and Martin Crowe were two of his clients. And I used to go to a gym when I was at St. Peter's College called the Institute of Sport. And Martin Crowe used to go there as well. And he knew enough of me that I was Bede's son, that when he was leaving and I was coming in, he'd say hello and he'd talk to me for 2 minutes. And I'm just like, whoa, you know, as Martin Crowe was a cricketer, was like one of the world's best batsmen. But I think because I had that when I was a kid, I can tell you what person, it wasn't one of my podcasts. I've told him this as well. What person made me feel most nervous being around. But as for the podcast, there's not really anyone that I can think of that's made me go, ooh. I mean, I had Russell Howard when he was in MIQ, which is probably the biggest name I've had. But he's a comedian and he's fun, and it was like, oh, g'day mate. G'day mate. What are we talking about? And then it was just off and running sort of thing. I also think stylistically, because what I do kind of literally as the empty beer cans are sitting around here is sort of over a beer and a casual chin wag. That sort of goes well. But a story that is the time I felt the biggest sort of nerves was actually my first radio job when I was working for More FM in Auckland. I was doing the mid-dawns, as everyone starts off in radio doing. And Jeremy Corbett walked into the studio because he did Kim and Corbett in the morning. And I was like, I got really nervous when Corby walked in. Ironically, I know him well enough now to text him and say he wants to come on one of these later, and he's not available, but through relationships we now know him well enough. But the first day he walked in, I was like, whew, and I realized while I was there that he'd done everything I was attempting to do. I was working for Theatre Sports Auckland at the time, doing improv comedy, that sort of stuff. He'd done all of that. He was a successful stand-up. He was probably one of the best radio announcers in the country. And when he walked into the studio, I was like, holy shit. So he wasn't like a boyhood hero or anything, but he was someone who gave me those butterflies. And other than him, I honestly can't really think of too many people. Certainly no one that comes to mind on my podcast. There's been a few times I've been a bit nervous about podcasts. When I talked to Megan Murphy, I was a bit nervous about that podcast, because she's seen to be some terrible human being, which I'm still a little bit unclear as to why. Well,
also, especially if you hear people, I think if you hear people a lot, you get into forgetting that you've got your audience to serve. So you jump into these things that you've heard and you're fascinated with, which is like a lesson from me about interviewing people that are really well known, is that actually I quite like the idea of just interviewing people that I have a gut feeling about. And do you have that? Are you calculated? Do you have a gut feeling about guests that you want to bring on?
I think this is probably both my weakness and my strength, is I talk to people who interest me. I don't actually think about the audience very much at all. I follow the build it and they will come philosophy. And I've always kind of been, whether it was doing radio or making digital content or whatever. Some of the stuff you've worked on, some of the stuff that I work with Elephant TV, and that I've always kind of done stuff that's interested me, manufactured it and put it out there for people to either enjoy or not enjoy. And sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do. So the only time that I can think of being calculated recently was, like, I'd love to talk to it's Billy TK, is that his name? The guy, the conspiracy theorist. I actually am really interested to talk to him. But I've made a calculated decision not to, because of the information he's putting out there that I don't actually want to put out there. But I'm torn on that one, because I actually, I talk to flat earthers. I talk to, I want to do a debate. I've just started watching that QAnon series off HBO. They've done a documentary series. I'm really interested in, like, some of the documentaries that I like to watch are always about the creative process. So, like, the Foo Fighters Back and Forth, 6 Days to Air, the South Park documentary. I like watching and learning about the process, but I like that in people as well. I want to know, why do you think this? What does it? Show me the line. Like, I've got a request in with Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, and his office came back to me 2 days ago saying, tell us more. And I just want to know, like, show me your sequence as to how you've got to Trump had the election stolen from him. Like, I genuinely want to know. So yeah, the only calculation I think for the audience has been possibly to go, I don't want to do this. I don't really have many calculations for the audience to say, I do want to do this. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I mean, every now and then I'll flick through and just see the people you're interviewing. Actually, I was on your YouTube page the other day and I was just scrolling through and I was like, you get some pretty big hits on some of your videos too, which is cool.
Oh, yeah, I think occasionally. I mean, it's not the.
Like,
I mean,
it's
obviously
tough.
Yeah, it is. But we've just been platformed by stuff, and that's where most of our audience, video audience, at least, is coming from. But always my audio audience has been bigger than any of the video anyway. So even though we do all of this and we make it look pretty and stuff, I still think in its absolute essence, this is still an audio podcast first.
Yeah. What was it like to interview Dave Rubin?
Yeah, that was interesting. That got a lot of exposure overseas because Sam Cedar's group picked up on it and ran with it. I think I missed a few things with him, but he was one of those guys. So people don't know who Dave Rubin is. He used to be a left-wing commentator. He saw the light and went to the right and became a right-wing commentator. A lot of people who are left on the left that used to work with him think of him as a bit of a grifter. That basically he's now offering opinions because that's where the money is, as opposed to it being his genuine self. I'm not saying that's my position. I don't know. But I was interested in that story. That was why I wanted to talk to him, because I was interested about that story. But he was one of those guys that I felt gave a lot of, pardon the pun, but pat answers, like the answers that were sort of just talking points. Because with American commentators, especially right-wing ones, I always want to say, why is my, I like, I've got a couple of requests in at the moment for some American right-wing commentators. I want to ask them, why is my country so terrible? And why is New Zealand so terrible compared to America? Why is our healthcare system, so terrible, so terrible that you guys will actually fight to keep it out of your system? But that's what I want to know. I want to know what's the upside of America and the downside of this, and why do you seem so malleable in your political leanings when the Reagan Republican would look like a Democrat today compared to the Trumpian? Like tell me about this process. Tell me about why you wouldn't put in Merrick Garland before Obama left, and you refused to have someone 10 months out voted in before an election. But when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, you put someone in like a month before an election. Just tell me about it, explain it. And I know we could always go, well, it's hypocrisy and it's just self-serving, and that's true, but I still want to know why. And when you present someone with it, I want to know why. I mean, there was a guy for the January 6th attacks, in the Capitol building, who went, oh, if you didn't know what it was, it wouldn't look much it would look pretty much like a normal day at the Capitol. And I just wanted to go, well, here's a video of the people kicking the door in. Is this what you see at the normal day? I just want to understand. You said that. Now we're looking at it together. Expand, please expand, because I want to know why. Maybe a part of that is that kind of Irish red-bloodedness in me that is kind of looking for a bit of a fight. But actually, it's only because I want you to stand by your words and explain to me what you meant. And if you can't, I actually kind of want you to back down, because you should.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit frustrating, isn't it? I think it's one of those things that we were referencing earlier. It's hard for me to understand why someone would actively try and deceive. But that's because I don't understand. I haven't been put in that many times where it would be part of my makeup, right? But put me in that scenario. I mean, one of the books, it's probably an extreme I'm reading at the moment, is Ordinary Men. And I don't know who the author is. Maybe I'll just have a look if everyone who doesn't know wants to have a look from it. It is by Christopher R. Browning. And basically it's the story of, the Nazi soldiers, but the early ones, before it was this implemented system. You had to take people and raise them or brainwash them to be something else, to be monsters. And I think I'm fascinated by that transition. I have been on a bunch of YouTube rabbit holes, not recently, but over the past couple of weeks, about North Korea, because I think I've seen, I forget her name now, but she popped up on a few international podcasts and talking about escaping North Korea. And the bit that really sits with me is, I think one thing this guest said, I should have a look, but it was that it was there was a time when it was different, right? When it had like when the language had a word for love and stuff like that, and that the fact that if you're there now and don't know that there was a past, I think that's the tension of things where people like where the conspiracy theorists, or like, I think on a deep down level, either they're consciously or unconsciously acting a bit like a antibody,
Right.
But to whether it's useful or not, you could just be a piece of whatever, not useful, but it feels. Yeah, I don't really know what I'm saying, apart from the fact that if you look at the immune system, which is quite relevant because COVID attacks the immune system, it needs to be strong. And to be strong, it has to work against itself. And I sometimes feel that that's what our civilization does. It pops these things up to prevent things being too pure. And I wonder if that's what annoys people about this kind of. I've heard and seen some of the stuff around Biden and just recently saying, say you were wrong if you think that, because when you don't, you're really galvanizing that people are going to have to force their way into that conversation. Like a
Yeah.
parent, maybe. Can you just admit that you didn't get it right, and then
Yeah.
we
And
can work on a
And that's
healing.
the worst in politics. People who say things like, I never said that. And you're like, well, actually, you know those big things with the lenses that sit in front of you that record every word you said? Now we'll play the 19 times you did say that. It's like just, yeah. I remember I wrote a piece for my blog. I don't write very much, but it was before the last American election. And I'm like, the Hunter Biden thing came out, and, Hunter Biden is been given jobs that he shouldn't have been given because of his qualifications, thanks to his dad, and yada yada yada. And I'm like, Biden just needs to come out and be 100% honest. Nepotism is a thing. It is an ugly thing. My family has benefited from nepotism. Mind you, just so you're clear while we're talking, look of the Trump children that are currently sitting in the White House. Don't let anyone think that this is a Biden issue. This is an ugly thing. I apologize to you if you like it. What I can promise you is from here on out, I will be fighting first and foremost for the American people, and that nepotism won't be a part of my, just own it, apologize for it, and move on. But, and I think that's a really, and there's not, let's not get bogged down necessarily in political conversation,
No.
in life in general.
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to that idea of, are they surrogate gods? And can a god admit a god's wrong, right? And I'm not trying to say it is or isn't like that, but my question to myself is, what's worth believing in at the highest level? And I don't know. So that's why I'm on this journey of trying to suss that out. But a god probably can't say they're wrong. They're above that. And if we've put this surrogate deal in place where our politicians are our gods, then it's like, well, yeah, other people are going to have to say it. I saw one of the clips that went viral is Jocko Willink kind of talking. He's does a lot of podcasting. He's a former Navy SEAL, as far as I could see, and his whole clip was what Biden could have said, right? And it's basically like a father would say, or a parent, or a person. Sorry, but look, yeah, it's very complicated, and I'm definitely not equipped to speak to that level, because I know there's more things going on than just my thoughts. But at the end of the day, there's a lesson in that too, to just bring it back, calm it down, slow it down, and it gets me to tape my mouth shut when I'm sleeping, try and breathe through my nose.
But just finally on that thing, the idea about apologies and being gracious. And me and Tim Bat were talking about this exact thing last night, purely by chance. Is that, we recently had an apology for the Dawn raids, and I saw some of the Pacifica community that attended that and what was being said by them and written about them and on their Facebook pages and stuff. And it meant so much. I remember when, and I think it was Kevin Rudd, I could be wrong, but when the Australian Prime Minister of the day finally apologized to the, Indigenous people of Australia about what, the stolen generation. And I'm not Australian, and I remember being in tears watching it from New Zealand. And I'll say genuine, authentic apology it's so powerful, and it's so disarming. And we can just take it on an interpersonal level. If you wrong your partner, if you wrong a friend, and you go to them with an authentic and genuine apology and look for their forgiveness, it's the it's more powerful than you can even explain. And it's the way to move forward in that interpersonal relationship. So obviously for these apologies that we're seeing for groups of people, it is the way to move forward as well. And yeah, I think that we should be fast to apologize and slow to hold on to our arrogant positions.
But
I
it's
think
the
we'd have
other
a
way,
better
isn't it?
life.
Yeah, but it's the other way, right? Those Dawn Raid apologies took 30 years type thing,
Yep, too long.
you know? And so there's something in that too where, you know, it's not that you can apologize, it's that the next generation have to do it. And I mean, yeah, it's it's fascinating for me to try and work out small ways to contribute that are positive. And I feel like a lot of people are trying to organize that too, you know, which is why, you know, I think there's a giant uptake in things like donating towards causes and Patreon accounts and, you know, different ways to support on a small level. Um, and for me, the jury's out whether we're contributing or not. You know, like two non-experts in many fields weighing in on lots could just be adding to anxiety. But I feel like the fireside chat's a really good campfire session, right? We spent many a night pondering together, trying to stay close to the fire to keep warm and to be in numbers so that as to not get eaten by an animal. And like, what's really changed? It's just the animals are a virus, and probably our own thoughts. So I think it's really nice to hunker down and do this, even if we have to do it digitally.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm just thinking about, you know, they talk about, you know, the marketplace of yesteryear was a literal marketplace that the community went to meet and discuss things, and now we talk about the marketplace being more digital for things. And I guess, as you say, the campfire in the background there tonight is digitally. Maybe there's something in there. Maybe there's something for the future to, you know, film a few of these around a proper campfire and see what kind of conversations will come out with a group of people. That could be
That'll
really
be
interesting.
awesome. That'll be
Yeah.
really awesome and cathartic, and I bet you it would tick the boxes of all of the outcomes. You know, like one of the big things I know in the Pacific community is the loss of language. You know, so how about you take the pressure off people speaking in that language, and you provide an environment where you would want to speak.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like that's where we've got to get right back to that very primal way. I like this word primal at the moment because it's not so bogged down in the negative stuff, but it's more like, you know, like get ourselves into a zone where we would feel like working for each other. You know, like a podcast. That's what I think we never talk about as podcasters. Is your guest and you, or us two right now, and the audience, we're all working for each other. You know, and I think that's why it's such good fun, and why you've done hundreds of them, and so have I. You know, and why you probably could make money easier, but something quite nice not knowing what you're going to say next or I'm going to say next, but it seems to always work out. It's quite I don't know, it feels like it's very spiritual in some ways, you know.
It is funny how, like, especially when I have academics and stuff on, because, you know, like I said, dumbest guy in the room, get an academic on, and how all of a sudden this epiphany comes. Oh, so we had one the other day. Oh, so we're kind of talking nature versus nurture. And then once you kind of barrel it down to a layman's conversation, it then just expands out again and goes for it. And yeah, I mean, I was thinking as well about the campfire. I think one Waitangi day, we used to own a property on West Auckland that was on the Manukau Harbour, big section. It was like a 12-bedroom house. It used to be like a almost a camping ground. And we decided to have a hangi for Waitangi Day, and had friends who would do the hangi and came around, and ended up having like 250 people coming for this hangi in West Auckland. It was fucking amazing, eh? But I remember the hangi being lit at, you know, it was still dark. So who knows, 5:30 in the morning, and all of us been down there on the grass and watching the flames, and just those conversation happening around the literal fire was a really special memory. And as I say that thing to you about doing one of these in real life, I kind of go, oh, so that sparks something. I can just imagine that being a a primal, something that you might get some real authentic conversations, and that excites me. That excites me.
I think we should do something like that. You should do it, or we should connect and do it, because kind of beautiful that we would use this digital skill set we have as a secondary feature. At the moment, it's the primary outcome.
Yeah.
And I think it's like we've got to find a way to put it, it's got to be second. It's got to serve us. And the more ways we can make it serve us, I think, the better, better for our mind and body and beyond,
Hey, well, it's been a blast hanging out with you by the campfire, by the fireside tonight. Just for people who are tuning in and still watching, and will pick this up on demand, there will not be one of these on Friday night, tomorrow night, as we record this, because, as I've said during this podcast, we have a birthday party going on in this house, and I will be attending that. And apparently, the movie is going to be Bohemian Rhapsody. We've decided that's what it's going to be, and the cake will be getting made tomorrow afternoon, and we will be having a celebration in my house tomorrow night. So they won't be doing one of these, but I think we're going to be back again on Saturday night. So if you've been hanging out with us and enjoying these sort of live streams to have company, then I think we're probably back Saturday night, probably 9:30. Just have a look on the Facebook page. Oh, that's where we're supposed to run the banner. That's what we do, isn't it? Like, we'll do this. Hang on. We'll have a look on. There we go. Do that. There we go. Come check us out on the Facebook page. It's the best place to find updates as to who's coming up and when they're coming up. But also podcasts. Tell people how to find you, bro.
Absolutely. So you can just search Please Blow My Mind on any of your favorite podcast platforms. I'm also on Instagram at Please Blow My Mind. And if you want to check out anything to do with the breathing, I've started, along with a friend of mine, a company called Manava Breathing, Manava Breathing. And it's all based around this ancestral breathing of nasal breathing and slow breathing, and breathe in, breathe out. And I've got plenty of little guide things on there. There's a free app you can download on iPhone, Manava Breathing, and it's just based on like slow it down, and beautiful things happen on not by accident, on purpose. You actually drive yourself into a calm state, which is one of the big things we've forgotten in this modern world of high speed everything.
Yeah. Cool, man. Hey, well, again, thanks for coming and joining in and being a part of this crazy thing we're doing to keep people company, and, let's be honest, keep ourselves company as well, and have interesting chats with people we know and love.
Yeah, Pat. Well, thank you, brother. Thank you for doing this. I'll champion you, because it's hard to do that. You're the one putting in these hours at 10 to 11 on a Thursday night.
Holy mackerel.
And serving humanity. So on behalf of us, man, thank you so much.
All right, dude. Hey, have a good one, and we will talk soon, and we will start planning that live fireside. We're calling it Primal. This is the Primal podcast. We'll have to, where we're going to meet. Is it going to be Nelson, or is it going to be Wellington? It's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's going to be one side or the other.
You choose, and we should redub the song Primal Countdown.
All right, dude. Take it easy. Thanks, people.
Bye,
We might see you on
Cheers.
Saturday night if you tuned in right now. And be safe. Wash your hands. And remember, if you are watching this live stream tomorrow, 3:00, we find out what's happening with the country. Fingers crossed, especially for those of us in the South Island. But no, for everybody. But especially for us. But for everybody.